Hey guys, we are in Esther 1 through 4 today, which is such a beautiful story. So Esther 1 is where I'm going to start. Verse 1, this king, I want to point out, is basically the king of the whole world. And in verse 4, we see that he holds a 6-month gathering showing off everything he has, just wasting time with these other kings. And then at the end of that, has a 7-day feast and literally orders everyone to indulge. Just indulge in everything. So get drunk, eat what you want, do what you want, anything you want. He orders it actually, which is quite interesting, right? Okay, and then during this time in history, so this is why Esther's here, is that it's during that exile when the Jews were under the Persian and Media rule. I think I'm saying that right, Media rule. And so they're under that rule. So we know that the Jews are when we see the Persian king and the Media king that are at this party, we know that the Jews are part of that. And that's how Esther gets in, okay? So I'm kind of trying to connect these dots for you guys. So now chapter 2, the king, what happens is the king throws his party. He asks for his wife to come and pretty much treats her as an object, and she refuses to come. So he gets upset. And they all tell him, well, you should banish her from your sight. And so he does that. But after everything dies down, he starts thinking about her. And what came to mind to me in this for chapter 2, verse 1 is how emotion throws all logic out the window. Like, there are so few things that need to get answered right away. Like, wait a day or two. Let the emotion stop so you can have a logical mind on how to handle it. You know, you don't need to do it right away. I kind of take the approach of nothing being that important. Like, nothing's an emergency, even though it feels like it, of like, oh, well, I don't want him to think this, or I don't want to have to wait, or it to go too long, or for it to then no longer be relevant. Like, it should always wait for us that emotion to die down. Okay, and then in verse 15, Esther stood out. We see that she stood out, continually winning favor, it says, with everyone, even before the king saw her, that God was just continually highlighting her, which is super cool, right? And then in verse 20, Esther and Mordecai are this beautiful example we see of like a husband and wife, where the husband, who's this protector, he covers them with protection, this loving guide, right? Lovingly guiding. And then a wife who has this obedience, respect, honoring her husband's leadership. It's also like a father and daughter relationship. And also what we see for God. God is this one keeping close watch over, and then us as this obedience in instructions. And we're called to trust him and follow God's lead, even when we don't understand the full picture. So she probably didn't understand why Mordecai was saying, don't tell anybody, but she trusted him and just obeyed that and honored that, which I think is super cool to see those parallels. And then in chapter 3, verse 4, Mordecai acts the same, we see, as Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, who simply just didn't bow because of their loyalty to God. So sometimes we think if we blur the lines that it doesn't really matter, that it's not a big deal, you know, but guys, God sees it, and it's a slippery slope. So stand firm in our faith and in our belief instead, for God to see that faithfulness we have. And like I said in those other chapters, when we read about these other guys, that he doesn't raise a big stink about it. He just doesn't bow. And that's why him got this rap from, what's his name? Haman, because he didn't bow to Haman. And so he ended up wanting to annihilate the entire Jewish population. And so verse 7, they were rolling dice to see what the best day was to kill off all Jews of all the nations, every single Jew, which is crazy, right? That it's like constantly after the Jews. And it fell on the 12th month, which is just God's providence of like giving the Jews time for God's plan to kind of like unfold, you know? And then verse 13, it came to my mind of how Jews are just constantly being threatened with complete annihilation. Like, we think of like all these like immigrants who had a really hard time, and then we had that slavery in our country that was a really hard time. But like multiple times through history, we see Jews wanting to be completely annihilated. Like, that is a whole nother level, you know? It's crazy, right? Like, there's been like race issues forever, right? Which is so sad. So sad. Okay, chapter 4, verse 14 is one of the most popular verses in Esther, where it was that's for such a time as this. But guys, what came to mind to me today was something totally different, was Mordecai's faith. How he says actually in verse 14, he's convinced that even if Esther stays silent, God will still deliver the Jews. He will still reserve a remnant no matter what, which I think is so cool. It says a lot about Mordecai. His faith was so deep. And he told Esther, like, hey, God's going to do it either way, but he's inviting you into this story. Maybe that's why you're there. So take courage, because God's going to do it either way, but you have a chance to be part of it. And how cool is that? So that's what stood out to me in this chapter, as well as 16. When Esther goes and seeks prayer. She says, all of you guys fast, all the Jews fast, all of me and my women are going to fast. And then I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in, even if it means they kill me, because it is illegal by law what you're asking me to do, but I'm going to do it. And she sought prayer from other people. And that's so important, guys, because prayer is the most powerful thing we can do. Whenever I'm doing something big, I am constantly like reaching out to my prayer warriors, like, hey, if you could pray for me, like that would be just the most meaningful thing for you to pray for me. And so it's so important to have those people in your life who you know will pray for you and pour into you in that way, because intercession is such a gift. And that's what I have for you guys today. So we'll see you tomorrow.